Okay, so this is going to be my panel wall. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So the client needed a deck so they could have this entertaining area. We raised it up about 18 inches from the ground level. So now when they're standing on top of the deck, they're looking right into the neighbor's yard. And so to create a little bit of privacy, we're going to do a panel wall. It's going to be horizontal slatted Western Red Cedar wood. What I want to do is I want it to look somewhat like a Mexican blanket, which is kind of fun, but the client told me a while ago they really like these things, and I'm like, how can I spice up this wall and not make it too kitschy, but make it interesting enough? So to build this wall, I'm going to use Western Red Cedar, and I'm using 1x4s, and I also have 1x6s and 1x8s, and I'm also going to use a really large 1x12 that's going to go in the center, and that's going to allow me to do different size pieces and give me kind of a cool pattern. So in order to start this wall, we put in a 2x4 pressure treated post. And I basically attached them to the metal posts that were already there. And then I added in posts every 3 feet in between. This one right here is just screwed in directly to the stringers of the fence. And that's going to allow me to attach my horizontal wood every 3 feet instead of every 6, because if I attach it every 6 feet, I run the risk of it sagging, especially if I'm using a 1x4. So by adding the 3 foot in between, I actually have more points of connection, so it'll be a stronger wall, and I shouldn't expect any sagging. Okay, so I went ahead and drew a line, and that's going to give me a reference of where my new fence is going to be, because you can see the existing fence follows the slope. This shows me that I'm going to have a nice level area above this pad, and then it's going to jump up over here. I'm actually going to start my boards on the bottom, so this might move more or less, but it gives me that reference. It's about 18 inches higher than the existing fence. Okay, so my cut list is more like my reference. I drew it, but of course I'm going to change things I already have. But I'm going to lay it out here and make sure I like it, and then I'll transfer it up to my wall. I'm using Western Red Cedar, which is nice because it's naturally insect and rot resistant, so I could actually just leave it raw and it would be fine. But most likely I'm going to stain it. Maybe I'll paint it. It's always hard for me to decide to paint cedar though, because it's so beautiful. So let's see, I think I'll start with these two. My spacing is going to be 3/4 of an inch, which is actually the width of this board, so I'll just use a board as my spacer. I'm falling apart here. And then I think we should probably time lapse maybe. But look at this big mama. Isn't this a beast? It's beautiful. I wasn't sure if I could get one by material and a 12-inch width, but I did, and this is going to be the centerpiece. What a beautiful board. The thing I need to think about with this one is I don't want it to cup, because it is so wide, 12 inches. It could, over time, like cup out or in, so I'm going to make sure that I lock it down on all ends. All right, so this is the pattern I'm going to go with. We got littles, mediums, big, and then tiny. So it all comes together to kind of make a cool, unique pattern following the Mexican blanket theme. Okay. Bottom board is my spacer because I want 3/4 inch spacing. This is the first board that you'll see. So I'm going to line this up flush. I'm going to start it here. I'm going to mark it, and then I need to cut it. So half of 3, 3.5 is 1 3/4, which is here, more or less. So I'm going to cut my board. I want to split the post because I need to make sure that I lock it in here and here, and the next board also needs to have enough meat to grab onto here and here when this one starts going that way. I'm going to lose about 1/8 of an inch with the blade, so I'm going to cut on the outside of my line. probably use a new blade soon. I got some fraying, but that's okay. All right, now I want to decide which side do I want out. That side looks good. It's not leaning either way right now, so that's good. If it was cupping, I would lean it towards the cup so it flattens out. So I'm just choosing for pure aesthetics, which they're really similar. They're both beautiful. So let's just go this way. Line it up with the end. So the nice thing is my deck is level, so I can just put this on and everything I can expect to be level, but it's good to double check just in case, because the last thing you want with a horizontal fence is it to be sloping a little bit, because it would be so obvious. That's actually, so I can see it's barely touching that line, which is okay, but I really want it like right here. So on the next board, I'm gonna make sure that I'm level right there. It's a spacer. God, that's beautiful, isn't it? Are we on like kind of a time lapse? Two boards up. Oh. All right, so I have the bottom of my boards up, and you can see I have the varied spacing. I have a 6x, 4x, 4x, and this is an 8x, and then I'm gonna just continue the random pattern all the way up the wall. And I'm using basically 3/4 inch spacing, so I'm using scrap wood from my other cuts to space it out. The most important thing that I think to take note of is the seams. So I'm spreading my seams out like every few boards, so that way they're not all in one line, because your eye would definitely be drawn to that. So by staggering them, it helps just a little bit in terms of like breaking it up and focusing on the pattern and not the cuts. That's pretty. Time for the big boys. Oh, this is a 12x, 1x12, which I wasn't even sure I could get, but it's super rad. I'm using this as my big fat accent. It's gonna be about breast height or so, or like chest height. So I'm super happy with how our panel wall turned out. As of now, I want to add a few more details. I also want to either stain, seal, or paint this wall. Because it is Western Red Cedar, you could also just let it gray out. But because I'm on top of a gray deck, we don't want it to go gray. We want it to keep its nice, rich color. So these are some of the samples I put together for the client. We have wood oil, I have a wood stain, and then I also have a semi-transparent stain and a solid stain, which is basically like a paint because it completely hides all the grain. So it comes down to your preference, really. There's no right or wrong. We have a lot of different colors here. Like this red would make it read very different, but the nice thing about using this stain is you can still see the wood grain, but you also get a pop of color. This one too, this is kind of like a blue tone. You also see the wood grain, but you kind of fill it in with this blue gray, which is kind of nice. And then of course we can go with just like a natural sealer, which would make this wood look like this for a long time, where like I mentioned before, if I don't put anything on this, it's gonna go gray. And then here's another option here where it's just a little more pumped up on the color. And basically when applying these either oil stain or semi-transparent or solid paints, you wanna just get some samples first before you put it up here, because once you put it up, it's a lot harder to get the color you want when you're trying up here versus down here. One thing I should mention is it would actually be a lot easier if you stained or painted this before you put it up. However, we were undecided what colors we wanted based on how the rest of the yard was coming together, so we decided to put it up. But if you know what color you want ahead of time, stain your boards and then put them up. Also, I dropped in 3 lights inside the deck. So I have 3 of these flux lights, and they basically have a shield that forces the light this way instead of opening it up, so if you're walking by here, it wouldn't blind you. And what that does is it really extends the life of this area into the night, and it just makes it look really cool. So for the cost of 3 lights, I think it's totally worth it. So I hope you guys like this Mexican beach blanket inspired panel wall, and maybe some of you, I already put it on my Instagram, some of you guys built your own, which is super rad. So if you do it yourself, tag me in it because I want to see it. And if you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below.